So my name is Katie Mason, and I work for the Larimer County Office on Aging. I'm also on the Partnership Steering Committee and the Summit Planning Committee. I'm co-chair of the Housing Priority Group, and when the Housing Group decided to conduct the senior housing study that was referred to earlier, there was little doubt who we needed to call to do that. We called Elisabeth Borden, the head of the Highland Group, which offers strategic research, planning, and marketing solutions for senior housing and care communities. Elisabeth's background working with older adults goes back to 1977 when she was an assistant administrator of a nursing facility here in Fort Collins. In the past 38 years, she has had many different roles in aging services and specifically senior housing. And she's left a lasting legacy in the field. So I'm very pleased to introduce Elisabeth. She will be unveiling the housing study that was commissioned by the Partnership for Age-Friendly Communities. Please join me in welcoming Elisabeth Borden.
So thanks for having me here as part of the Summit on Aging. I'm really happy to be in Fort Collins. And I really appreciate being able to participate in your summit here. We've been trying to do some work like this in Boulder County, but don't ask me about how that's going, because we've got some serious anti-everything we're talking about here going on there, but thank God for you. I want to acknowledge the sponsors, the organizations that funded this the report that we did and the presentations today. They're all listed on this slide, so as you see these folks, be sure you appreciate their contributions. Yeah, woo! So before I get started, I just want to give you a little bit of warning about what I'm going to do. I've been asked to highlight a 100-page report in 45 minutes flat, so I'm going to go faster than I usually do. I have more text on my slides than I usually do. I'm going to read a little more than I usually do because our report has been divided into 5 submarkets looking at different areas of the county and trying to do each one justice, and it's kind of there's a lot of sort of data geek in there, but also so I'd love to stop and talk and chat with you about things as we go along, but if I did, I'd get all jazzed up and I'd never finish. So I'm just going to talk fast and keep going. So just let me tell you about the report first. We've just completed an extensive report that was commissioned by the Housing Priority Group of the partnership, and my presentation today is largely based on that. It looks separately at the whole of Larimer County, as I said, as well as 5 submarkets. They were identified by the Housing Priority Group, and that is Fort Collins, Loveland, Rural Mountains, Rural Plains, and Estes Park. The report includes demographic data, tabulations of age-restricted housing and care in each area, the current and short-term calculations of unmet demand or oversupply, trends impacting housing needs now and into the future, and some actions and directions that we think will help make Larimer County more age-friendly. And as I go through these, if you don't like any of our tabulations of how many housing and care units we have everywhere, we did cross-check all our information through these very nice directories that are published by your Larimer County Office on Aging, so just to double-check our data. So they're the source, so if you see anything you don't like, call them up. So here's my plan. I'm going to, again, overview the 5 submarkets. What are the areas? What's the current match and mismatch of housing and supply, or supply and demand? And then I'm going to identify some key socioeconomic and generational trends that are already beginning to impact what we need in terms of what are the different types of housing and care, market rate, affordable, urban, rural, housing and owners, younger, older, those looking for housing, those needing care. And then I'm going to end by highlighting some actions and directions I believe make sense for Larimer County, citizens, public officials, local government staff, housing operators, developers, and care providers. So for people of all ages, the first thing we all know is we need a very diverse mix of preferred and affordable housing for all ages of people it's a big factor in livability in any community. And as people reach their 50s and to 70s, their needs and preferences often shift as family and work responsibilities change. People in that age group often have increased freedom, which I'm really looking forward to live where and how they want, and that freedom is often combined with a need or desire to reduce expenses. For the oldest age groups, additional settings are needed that either directly offer or help facilitate support and care services, social and community connection, health, wellness, personal care, and end-of-life care. So, of course, the most obvious factor in livability and inavailability of desired or needed housing is the ability to pay the market cost, whatever that is, whether you're buying a new patio home, whether you're paying for stay in assisted living. In the cities, there's rarely a shortage of good quality market rate housing and care for people as they age, but that's not the case with rural areas. And more funding is always going to be needed for affordable assisted living, affordable or rental apartments. So all those things being true, there's still many other aspects of housing and care that can be addressed to increase livability in Fort Collins. And as the partnership moves forward, it's mostly likely going to explore possibilities within all these aspects of livability related to housing. I'm going to touch on a lot of these in my remarks today. The option to live in your preferred housing, housing that supports community and family relationships, that can be adapted as needed, physical accessibility, access to technology, good quality and maintenance, housing that reduces the need for cars and for special transportation, housing that facilitates mutual and informal support and care, and professional and paid services available as people need them. Okay, so that little bit of background. I'm going to shift gears here and get into some detail about Larimer County and the 5 submarkets that we studied. Before I jump into the first market, I just want to make a little technical note. I am one of those data geek notes. In calculating supply and demand, we're really careful to use some specific industry definitions, and these may not be the same definitions used by you. So I just briefly wanted to show you what those are. Don't read all of those, but there were specific definitions endorsed by the 5 major national senior housing organizations a few years ago to ensure some consistency. The only 2 terms I really want to spotlight are the terms independent living and senior apartments or age-qualified apartments. Those are often used interchangeably, but I'm not using them interchangeably as I talk through today. For independent living, that definition specifically is rental retirements or apartments and cottages that include meals and a range of other services, so high levels of bundled services. In this area, that would include places like Sugar Valley Estates, the Hillcrest, or the Worthington or Mackenzie Place in Fort Collins. And then senior apartments or age-qualified apartments is defined as a separate product type that does not include services like dining and housekeeping. They're just nice apartments, maybe some activities. These would be places like the Legacy in Fort Collins, Hamilton Park in Berthoud, or Pine Knoll in Estes Park. So as you start to see numbers and your head starts to spin with some of the numbers, you'll that's what we're talking about. And the outlines on this Larimer County map show the boundaries of the 5 submarkets. I do have other maps that will zoom in on the different areas. All the areas were defined by using census tract boundaries. So it may not be exactly what someone would pick, but it's what the Census Bureau picked. Again, Greater Fort Collins, Loveland, Estes Park and surrounding area. What is really the remainder of the western 2/3 of Larimer County, except for Estes Park, and then the rural plains, which is actually two areas separated that are the northeastern portion of the county and then the southern portion of the county, including Berthoud. And those, if you want to argue with someone about you don't like those areas, those were defined by your housing priority work group, and we're very compliant. They said do this, we do. That's what we do. I promise this is my one and only foray into demographics, but I just wanted to give you, show you this slide to give you a sense of what the numbers are within those submarkets. First of all, about half the population overall is in the Fort Collins submarket. About a quarter is in the Loveland submarket, almost a quarter in rural plains, about 10,000 in Estes Park, and 12,000 in the rural mountains submarket. If you look about 2/3 of the way down the table, We've broken out the age 75 plus. There are 12,000 people over 75 in 2015 in the county, and of those, about 5,000 of them are in our Fort Collins submarket, about 4,000 are in Loveland, 2,200 in the rural plains, about 1,000 or almost 1,000 in Estes, and about 500 in rural mountains. If you look at the line where the blue arrow is pointing, you'll see the number of age 75 low-income households. These are folks whose incomes are below what's now the Medicaid long-term care threshold, which is about $26,000 per year. There are about 4,700 of these households in the county now, and I'm pointing this out because I think this is probably the group we need to be the most concerned about relative to availability of good housing and care. Interestingly, there are almost as many low-income 75-plus households in Loveland as there are in Fort Collins, about 660 in the rural plains and about 200 in Estes, 160 in the rural mountains. Okay, I'm going to start with the Fort Collins submarket, not because I like it best, but I put them in order of the total population in the area. For purposes of this report, the Fort submarket was defined as the greater Fort Collins area, again along census tract boundaries. So this table lists the total number of units within each of 8 different age-qualified housing and care types within the submarket. We've only listed throughout this report properties that are actually legally age-restricted or age-qualified, not any other kind of housing people might live in, which is the majority of people. Because as you know, most people over 55 live in regular old houses, apartments, mobile homes, condominiums. They don't live in, nor want to live in anything that's necessarily defined for old people or seniors. But looking at the number of units in the supply in Fort Collins, about 500 of these 612 for sale units are in mobile and manufactured home communities. There are nearly 1,500 skilled nursing and subsidized apartments, and 102 Medicaid assisted living units, which is telling me that most of the units available in Fort Collins are targeted to lower income people, which is a good thing, because by the time you need care, particularly, a lot of people don't have any money left. So I'm sorry for all the text on here, but I thought this would make a really good handout. When you download the handout from the website, from the partnership, all the information will be on there. So I know there's a lot on this slide, but so what's the I can't even say this, the match and the mismatch of housing and care supply in Fort Collins? As a generally affluent community, Fort Collins has a plentiful supply of good market rate, independent living, assisted living, and memory care. For those types of properties, supply and demand appear to be in balance here and will likely remain so through pure market forces, as demonstrated by several properties that have recently opened and some under development, including the under construction Morningstar Fort Collins. Because the 55-plus for sale communities we have now are mostly affordable and mobile, manufactured mobile homes, there's most likely demand for housing that's a little higher price and for some age-qualified patio homes and condominiums. Skilled nursing inventory in Fort Collins is a mix of newer and older properties, a mixed quality. There's an apparent oversupply of 100 beds in the area based on vacancies. But a new skilled facility, Main Street Health and Wellness Suites, is now developing a 100-bed, all short-term skilled facility that's expected to get underway here soon. Then we're saying there's significant unmet demand for age-qualified affordable rentals. There are 2 planned properties right now looking for funding. Probably only one of these will get funding and be able to move forward. Assisted living that's affordable is also in great demand, and that's going to be true some of these things will be true in every community I talk about, and that's one of them. Affordable apartments, affordable assisted living. Market rate age-qualified apartments is a newly emerging housing type, and it's more of a baby boomer product. It's like, oh, maybe you really do want to get out of your house, and maybe you want to live with people your age in a cool downtown location, but you don't want to live in a place where you get all your meals and housekeeping and all this stuff you don't want, and you're not there yet. This is a very new emerging product type. And there is one 161 unit project right now in Fort Collins that's expected to break ground this year. So moving on to Loveland. This area generally stretches from the Larimer County line on the east beyond I-25 to the foothills on the west. As on the Fort Collins slide, again, it lists just estimated unit counts of age qualified and care types in this Loveland submarket. Loveland has a very large number of overall units relative to its population. Overall, they have more assisted living units than in Fort Collins and almost as many independent living units despite the lower population. The biggest number, again, for sale 55 plus, 557 units, is almost entirely owned units in mobile and manufactured home communities, I think with the exception of 24 units at Mirasol. Otherwise, Loveland has more assisted living units in Fort Collins and almost as many. Yep, I already said that. Again, same dynamic. Most of the units are in affordable types of seniors housing and care, and part of the issue going forward, I think, is that's what everyone used to develop, and now the preponderance of new development is in very expensive market rate, and that's shifting that balance, perhaps not in a way that works for us. So the match and mismatch in Loveland, what does that look like? Again, Loveland has a plentiful supply of good quality market rate, independent living, assisted living, memory care. It seems at the moment to us to be skewing toward oversupply. A lot of new development and interest in development. Skilled nursing inventory, again, is a mix of newer and older properties. Our demand calculations, just looking at numbers, tell us there's an oversupply, although in dividing this up in submarkets, what you have to understand is people in the mountains and rural areas go into the city, and they use nursing homes, and they use assisted living, and they use memory care in Loveland and Fort Collins. And so the way some of these, these demand calculations come out, it looks like, well, we need a lot more in the rural and mountain areas, and we don't have enough, or we have too much in the cities. But that's because a lot of those are occupied by people that come in from the mountains or the rural areas. I just want to mention, too, that many people throughout this whole state are very excited about the new greenhouses at Mirasol that offer what all of us hope, everyone is hoping, are the first of a whole new generation of a way to provide skilled care. So we're all excited about that. I hear they're about to break ground soon out in Akron. Again, in every area, strong unmet demand for affordable rentals. No known projects in the pipeline right now in Loveland. Affordable assisted living. Market rate, age-qualified rentals. Again, strong demand. We're estimating strong demand, but we do have one project under development here, Traditions at Loveland, a planned 165-unit market rate property. We think is going to go forward. But, you never know. We don't have a crystal ball, but we just try to guess. The Rural Plains submarket actually is the next largest size population-wise. It's defined as two separate areas. Again, essentially everything in the eastern portion of the county that isn't in Loveland or Fort Collins. The northern portion lies north and east of Fort Collins to the Weld County border and the Wyoming-Colorado border, and contains LaPorte and Wellington. The southern portion falls west of 25 and south of Loveland, including the town of Berthoud. Looking at supply in Rural Plains, there are 4 small assisted living homes in the northern portion up north of Fort Collins. The town of Berthoud in the southern portion of the Rural Plains submarket is served by an older skilled nursing facility, some affordable age-qualified apartments, and one 12-resident assisted living home. Also, we have Sunflower, a large age-qualified manufactured home community that's east of Fort Collins across I-25. As you see, as we get to start getting smaller here, you're starting to see some zeros in those supply numbers. So again, what's the mismatch and match of supply and demand? We did calculate a serious undersupply of assisted living and memory care. On the other hand, again, you have to look at that in light of in combination with the strong supply that's in the adjacent Fort Collins and Loveland, which which people routinely use when they need these kind of services. So again, supply in Fort Collins might appear as if they have too many skilled nursing, too much assisted living, but many of the units are occupied by people who come into town. It's like they come into town for everything, for other things. That said, we think there's also demand for additional age-qualified rental apartments, Medicaid assisted living, market rate assisted living, any of which I believe could develop on a smaller scale, on a scale that's appropriate to the rural nature of that submarket. There's also demand for probably age-qualified demand for sale patio homes in the probably in the Berthoud area, where I think new housing sales are pretty strong. So Estes Park I've been going to since I was 10 years old, so it's kind of my favorite, but I shouldn't say that. Estes Park is defined really only as the greater Estes Park area. There are only 2 census tracts making it up, and it's completely surrounded by public lands, to the west and the north by Rocky Mountain National Park, and to the east and the south by Roosevelt National Forest, and the whole southern half of the submarket actually is also public recreation lands. So while the Estes Park submarket isn't large geographically, its population is concentrated around a town center. That's pretty good size. It also has a sizable population of retirees, with a generally older population mix than the other submarkets. Estes Park's fortunate to have attracted a Good Samaritan retirement village offering independent living apartments and duplex twin homes, as well as assisted living. They've had a skilled nursing facility there for many years, Prospect Park Living Center, which is part of the Estes Park Medical Center, and that has 3 affordable age-qualified apartment communities. And by the way, age-qualified is an awkward word, and I keep using it, but I hate the name senior. So I try to never have it come off my lips. So and I think a lot of baby boomers don't like the word senior so much. So we're calling everything age qualified now. So you can argue with me later if you want. Again, looking at supply and demand in Estes Park, skilled nursing beds appear to be in balance with demand. Looking at what would be expected, on the other hand, Prospect Park reported it only had 35 beds occupied out of its 60 beds on its last state census report. Most of the residents there are on Medicaid. We've estimated additional potential demand in the Estes Park area for both market rate and Medicaid assisted living, as well as demand for memory care assisted living, of which there is none in the market at the moment, nor are there any age-qualified market rate rental options, and we've calculated demand for those, as well as additional affordable rental units. And our 5th submarket, Rural Mountains, it's been defined as the mountainous 2/3 of Larimer County. It contains all the land between the northern and southern boundaries of the county, with the exception of the Estes Park area. I think it kind of looks like a tooth, with the Estes Park being the root, I guess. It contains the communities of Bellevue and Red Feather Lakes, and other than that, lots and lots of beautiful recreational land. Of course, the majority of the people in this area actually live in the foothills and canyons just west of Loveland and Fort Collins, so are perhaps in many ways more oriented to those communities than they are looking west for housing solutions. There are only 2 known housing or care properties that are located within this submarket. There's a lot of zeros on there. And those are 2 small assisted living homes located immediately west of Fort Collins in the foothills between the city and Horsetooth. You could almost maybe more say they're Fort Collins or Fort Collins properties, but they're in this submarket. If you live in this Rural Mountain submarket and you aren't living near one of the cities, you're likely a long, long way away from any services or care-based housing. And if you needed care, you've probably already gone into town. But although our calculations specific to this area conclude there's a moderate level of unmet demand for every housing and care type, again, you got to look at that in combination with who's going to go, what's more appropriate to offer or in Fort Collins or Loveland. That said, just looking at the numbers of people in this submarket, we would expect that just the residents of this submarket would generate demand for 40 to 50 skilled nursing beds, an additional 30 market rate assisted living units, 31 Medicaid assisted living units, and 20 memory care assisted living units. Also demand for age-qualified rental apartments or cottage units at 70 to 80 affordable and 40 to 50 market rate units. We also think there's potential demand, again, for age-qualified for-sale homes. However, the kind of geography and the types of areas that are in this submarket may not be particularly appropriate or have the right kind of land options to develop for-sale home communities. All right. So now I just want to shift gears a little and look at Larimer County as a whole. In Larimer County, we're able to project out to 2040 because of those lovely demographics that are estimated by the State Demographer's Office. They're only at the county level. There's no way, and I even talked to Elisabeth about this a couple months ago. I said, there's no way we can generalize about how that splits out in the county, what the growth is to 2020. So using those demographics, because we have them, we could then combine those with the percentage of people who need or use different types of housing or care. And then we also forecast, so we use that to forecast potential demand for all these same housing and care types at the year 2040, so 25 years from now. And to do that, we first made some assumptions about which types of housing and care we believe will become more preferred or chosen, and also whether we think higher or lower percentages of people will be able to afford them. So we made assumptions both about what people will choose and what they can afford, and we have used our own data and magic, everything, and some incense, and because I'm from Boulder, right, and come up with our own estimate of how use of these different facilities or communities will change over time. So looking at the yellow column, the blue symbols indicate the direction of the assumptions we built into our demand calculations. For example, in the yellow column, we project fewer people will choose nursing homes for long-term care over time, as shown by the down arrow. I bet no one disagrees with that. And this is actually based on a 20-year consistent downward trend in Colorado. We believe the proportion of people who will choose assisted living for long-term care into the future will remain about the same, as shown by the equal sign. So in the two columns on the right, we're displaying our projection of whether a larger or smaller proportion of people will be able to afford market rate housing or will be eligible for subsidized or housing or care. And you'll see that's all very consistent because we're projecting that an overall, a lower proportion of people are going to be able to afford market rate housing and care in the future, and that's primarily due to rising costs of those options, and possibly some reductions in income and assets in certain groups. But the costs are going up way faster than people's incomes, and then so then this table displays the result of our overall projected demand for each of these housing and care types to the county, first in 2015 for an intermediate year, 2025, and out to 2040. I think you can see that this big growth in our 60-plus crowd over the next 25 years has a very big impact on potential demand, particularly if you look at the numbers way out in 2040 and how those shift from 2015. And again, this is taking into consideration who might choose what and who might be able to afford what. And we still end up with these pretty big numbers. So if looking at those numbers and thinking about costs makes you go gulp, you aren't alone, because these are the kind of numbers that make people's eyes pop, and cities, and make people conjure up terrible phrases like silver tsunami, which I don't want to hear from any of you people out there. Thankfully, I haven't heard today. That the aging of the boomers is certainly not going to be a tsunami. On the contrary, I think it's a great opportunity that we want to seize. And that's why, even though we've done all these demand calculations of all the possible things we might need, and we do need a lot of the same kinds of things. We've got to look beyond that to new ways that our communities can support preferred housing options and cost-effective housing and care choices for people. So then we get to the good stuff. So next I'm going to just go through some trends impacting housing and care and some implications of those trends. The trends in a couple categories: generational trends, what will boomers do, economic and household trends. The first thing's obvious. I want to make sure you know that I know that boomers are very diverse. And we don't all want the same housing and going to make the same choices. So know that, because when you hear me say what I think some trends about boomers, I know everyone's not the same. So what are some of those trends that I think will have something to do with housing and care and how people want to have their housing and care? First, the majority of people have always stayed in their own home and are going to want to stay in their own home. Most people will say they never want to go to age-qualified housing or any kind of retirement or seniors place. Boomers want to stay, and I'm glad that I'm following the same theme that you've heard from everybody else. And I think it's because most of your speakers have been baby boomers, and we kind of, we've grown into this. So want to stay engaged, relevant, and current. We're the most social generation ever. We are working longer so we can afford the way we want to live. We like to believe we're unique and cool and rebellious. I don't know how but we like to think it, I'm just saying. We don't want to be housed and managed in anything that feels like an institution. We value interdependence. Our themes are I'll get by with a little help from my friends and lean on me. And some of us are dreaming up our own brand of co-housing, not necessarily the official co-housing, but getting together with friends, family, and colleagues for friend and companionship, and we've always liked to do our own thing. So we still want to do our own thing. Then more than previous generations want to live in walkable, vibrant downtowns, suburban town centers. More want to rent than previously, looking for flexibility and freedom. Not as many are even in a long-term house where they raise the kids. There's less trust in big financial institutions to take care of us and safeguard our money. I personally have a little stash under the mattress, but I'm not telling you my address now that I said that. We value green and sustainable, organic, local business and sourcing. We like to play outdoors and go to the gym. We want to look and feel younger and healthy, and travel, connect with friends and family, spend money on fun friends and grandkids. I think I heard 2 other people already say this today. Not so much on housing, right? When we want to change laws to have individual choice about the manner and timing of our death, and who is it here? I met somebody here this morning that's working with conversations on death. Yeah, so we're doing that. We want to have those conversations. So we don't want to live in a nursing home. Just saying, maybe some people do it. So some economic and household trends. Again, we heard some of this before. Obviously, the big population shift, lots of people living into their 90s. Larimer County with the lower proportion of that middle-aged households, not the young, but the middle-aged. Boomer families have fewer adult children. We have more boomers are single and divorced and living alone, more second marriages, more blended families. And more of the adult children of boomers, those 35-year-olds, who said that before, that still need financial, child care, and housing support from their parents. And then as boomers and parents die, this is interesting, fewer parents will relocate to the county and be near their kids. Because the main reason people move when they're older is to be near their kids. And that's been a major source of whatever in-migration we've had. And then obviously trends in health and technology are reducing some need for care and opening up some new housing options, joint and organ replacements, high-tech prosthetics, improving and restoring function, technology for allowing communication with families and health providers, and for in-home safety and monitoring. Boomers working longer out of a need and desire to maintain our lifestyles, retirement incomes not keeping pace with health care and housing costs, health benefits eroding, homeowner equity is mixed because we have higher housing values, which is good, but more of us still have a mortgage. Then big labor shortages and caregivers, and I don't have time to go into this, but I think there's a big pending issue with the fact that real estate investment trusts now own most market rate senior housing and care in the United States and in Colorado. And this has only happened in the last few years, and it's more and more becoming a big money real estate business rather than a care business. And I think that has dangerous potential for the future. So I want to quickly look at some implications of these trends. So what? What do those mean for housing and care? About what might be wanted or needed? And I'm going to look at them both for the younger crowd, who I call 55 to 80. That's more of a housing options, and then for the little bit older crowd, or people that need help for long-term care and support services. So I believe the mix of the housing inventory we have now will increasingly be a mismatch with what we need. If we need for 60-plus people more walkable, more rental, more multifamily, more affordable than we have now, we need to continue to increase accessibility through main floor bedrooms, elevator buildings, zero-stop and universal design, and in new housing as it's built. A need for new and retooled home designs to support sustainability, homes that are low maintenance, energy efficient, accessible, not just the same old home types and the same old apartment unit types that we've always had. And I think it's really important that new rental developments need to support self-employment and self-help. We got a lot of freelancers, people still working. We need internet, meeting space, garage and shop space, gardens and wellness, not just an activity room and a beauty shop. Come on, you got to work. Again, there is a growing gap between market pricing and long-term care. I just looked at some data I studied the numbers in Fort Collins. Just over the last 6 years, the cost of assisted living has gone up $1,100 a month at the base rate, and that's not all those extra. When you add in all the extra service fees, it's gone up $3,000 a month. And that's not the total price in the last 6 years, while Social Security's gone up $165 to $265 a month. So increasing labor shortages are going to make it harder to provide good care. Right now, and this in-migration thing's important, because right now 30% of the people that live in every senior place in Larimer County, on average, came from somewhere else. They were brought here by their baby boomer kids. So that's going to impact occupancies and need for those market rate places. When fewer people have spouses and adult children and there's less informal care, from family available, how's that going to be replaced? How do we deal with that? Increased individual choice and timing of death may reduce long-term stays. I'm like I said, I'm for that. Some people think it's a bad thing. And then for some smaller and rural choices, and particularly in rural areas and areas with, and it's what people want to, because not everyone wants to live in a big giant retirement village. Small home-based mutual support options that are integrated with formal health systems, community, neighbor, volunteer involvement for some high touch, and then the high tech for communications with friends and families, for remote medical, for remote monitoring. So here's what I think you ought to do. And this, I think, is the work plan for the Housing Priority Group for the next year. So on the state level advocacy, funding, obviously, fix that construction defects law so we can get some affordable for sale condominiums. Better Medicaid reimbursement, better Medicaid reimbursement for assisted living so we can have some internet service. We need internet service in rural mountain areas for a lot of reasons. Programs to increase long-term care work sort. We need to train nurses. Changes in laws to allow more choice in death. So state legislature, here's your homework. Okay. Local land use, we've got a lot of land use policies in the way of doing these kinds of things we've been talking about because they protect the status quo, the single-family home neighborhood. And all the specific zoning makes it really hard to do something different somewhere else. More homes with ancillary apartments, accessibility, trying to work effectively with neighbors. And I can't say enough about this because we're having big trouble in Boulder with this. Who don't want any of these alternatives in their neighborhoods. And it has been approached well, but you all are going to do a better job. I think given that we've got 1,200 affordable mobile and manufactured homes, we need to protect and preserve those. Money. First, I really think we have to find ways to contain costs. Find ways to contain costs, to contain the costs, first of all. We're never going to have enough money to pay for what we need. So how do we spend less? How do we take care of each other is really important. But then we're still always going to need dollars to build preserve existing housing and build new housing, to pay for home renovations, pilot projects for new and retooled options, and some waivers and fees of city costs to increase affordability. And I just wanted to end with this. Trust in, you got to trust us, right? Trust in self-help and mutual support, because I think this is where we can make some real change. And stop seeing baby boomers as a needy group that will drain resources. We're not the silver tsunami. We're not going to crush all of you, drown you. You need to see people as assets. Expect that they want to be engaged, expect that they're going to help solve problems, that they are going to support their families, they're going to care for other people. Embrace new choices so if we can implement some of these new choices, people can spend less money on their housing now and save it for later when they need to pay for care. Well, why overspend, 30, 40, 50% of your income on housing? But there's no natural developer. There's no developer that's going to go do these small options and group homes and the little mini co-ops and things. And so somebody, maybe some nice housing authorities or other people, need to help find ways to help create some of these new options, because we can't expect individual people that want to live in these to go make them all up themselves and fight City Hall for the zoning rules. So that's what I wanted to end with. Get creative. Have some dreaming and visiting sessions, which I think you are doing this afternoon. I'm really happy to start talking about the process with you this afternoon and get to stick around and instead of just running my mouth as fast as I can for the last 45 minutes. We can actually talk about it. So anyway, thanks for your attention and thanks for having me.
All right, first question, please. Please talk a bit more about the values of interdependence and co-housing. Is this communal living, Golden Girls, etc.?
Honestly, it goes back to that diversity issue. I have a lot of friends, and we're all interested in something, but every single person has a different idea. I personally want my own separate little tiny unit that has my own little kitchen, and if I don't want to see anybody for 3 days, I don't have to. Other people want to live in a house with 10 people and share the kitchen. Not for me, but some people want that. So some it is Golden Girls. Some it's some of us are looking for 4plexes and 8plexes to reconfigure and create some common space, but each have our own separate units. Some people are looking at something they call cooperatives. Some people like the bigger, kind of more formal co-housing. I think there's many ways to do it, as there are people that are. And the difficulty is that none of them are really defined, allowed, so that it's challenging to do it anyway. But it's all of those things. One thing we just tried to do in Boulder was there was an ordinance a change to allow up to 6 unrelated adults live in a single-family home if they're over 62. Perfectly reasonable, right? Great ideas. We know people over 62 are responsible. Plan Boulder, and a bunch of neighborhood activists showed up at City Council and said it was horrible and it was going to ruin all the neighborhoods and destroy things. And so the City Council tabled it, did. Anyway, so my only answer to that is there are a lot of different models and options, and people are going to want different things. So.
Good. This is a question of my own, but are there models we're a university town, right? So matching kind of older residents with students? And this might be a question for Andrew for the next speaker too.
That I don't know. I know somebody here, some part of the housing priority group was looking at doing that, and I think it's a good idea. Again, I think we need to come at this. If we got 10 types of senior housing now, we need 100 kinds of ways for people to live. And so I think we've got a lot of. I don't know what the number is here. I've got homeowner, renter things, but. Just in Boulder, I calculated recently, there were like 3,500 people over 65 living alone in an owned home. One person, single family homes, you've got to know there's a lot of wasted housing there that's needed by other people. So I think that makes a lot of sense to do that. Yeah. I wish I could-
Do you have any thoughts on how the arrival of programs like PACE will affect how we deliver housing/care to our qualified population?
Well, and I don't know how many people know what PACE is, but PACE is basically a super HMO that provides the full range of acute and long-term care, everything people need. They try to, for a capitated payment every month, they try to keep people in their own homes by having day centers and as well as providing services in the home. I think it's an extremely important program to have, and it's been very effective where it exists. Hopefully it's achieving what it's supposed to achieve, which is keeping people out of nursing homes and keeping people out of assisted living.
So this card says, did I understand this correctly? For boomers, we moved our parents closer to us, but we won't move to be closer to our kids.
I didn't say you wouldn't move to be closer to your kids. I didn't say that. I did say most people that move that are over 60 or 65, the reason they move is to be closer to their kids. But I didn't say boomers wouldn't do it. We might be, they're living with us. We don't have to move to. No, I had my kids really late, and I still have a 17 and a 19-year-old, and I told them the second my 17-year-old goes to college, I'm selling the house, and I'm going to get a little camper van and just spend a couple years having no housing and no housing costs and just drive around the country and visit all my friends and my 5 siblings and do that for a while. I said, so if you want to move back in with me, you can come travel with me, but I'm not keeping your room open for you, so you can go over to Andy's house maybe.
So I have the answer to this question, but I'll ask us an answer so everyone has it. How can we get a copy of the housing study? It's already on the website. So again, the website's in the back of the room, the foalarimer.org.
The whole study is on there?
Yeah, the study's already posted
I was
on
still
there
I found
on
a
the
few
right
little
side under
typos.
news. So.
I found a few little typos I was still going to fix. Maybe I'll do that tomorrow and we'll repost it.
How is the data of the number of Medicaid beds collected? From the state, from the facilities themselves? It is counting the number of beds certified for Medicaid, or is it the number of Medicaid clients facilities are accepting?
That's a really good question. Some technical, geeky person like me. We actually count it by in 2 ways. It's usually reported by the facility itself, because if somebody accepts Medicaid and they have a 20-bed they're licensed for 20 beds, they still might only have, you don't know. They don't have to, there aren't rooms that are designated for Medicaid or not Medicaid, and it varies, although most of them follow a pretty typical pattern. So if we're pretty, for some of them, we're pretty sure everyone that lives there is Medicaid, but for the most part, we call them and we ask them, whenever we're studying a certain area, we say, what's your mix, and is that typical? And so that's how we track it.
This is a connected question. I don't know if you have any more to add, but when you say that the supply of, what was it again? Skilled nursing facilities and assisted living Medicaid beds is pretty good, are you taking into consideration that a lot of facilities require a period of private pay before a resident can have a Medicaid bed? So some beds are being saved by current residents and other low-income folks are out of luck.
Skilled nursing, you said?
Yeah. So saying that certain beds are not Medicaid beds at the beginning, that you have to have a private, and then they, I guess, become, I'm not sure.
Now I already forgot the first part of the question.
Said, are you taking into consideration that a lot of facilities require a period of private pay before a resident can have a Medicaid bed? I don't know if you're not familiar with that.
Skilled nursing is different than a lot of the other housing types and care types, because in it, the preponderance of inventory is old. It's from the 60s and 70s. And so the part of the issue in looking at need for nursing homes is not how many beds you have, but how many of them are decent, how many of them are not obsolete, how many are something you would actually want to be in. And it's my belief that we need to knock down a good portion of this skilled nursing inventory throughout the state and the country and replace it with something newer. And we haven't been able to do that so much because there's been a moratorium on Medicaid beds in this state because the state of some level of protection of the existing facilities, and the state doesn't want to pay for Medicaid people to be in. They don't get to be in new beds except in, in some lucky places like the greenhouses at Marisol. But we look at the typical mix. We get the state census reports, then they're reported by payer type every quarter, and we look at what percentage of people or how many people on any given day are in a Medicaid bed, that are a Medicare resident, a Medicaid resident, and so we try to use a statewide average. When we're looking at what's expected, we're looking at what would we expect, how many beds would we fill here based on what's the average across the state of Colorado, and that's how we've used it. We did not factor in any waiting period of private pay, and I'd love to talk to you about that because I haven't heard of any properties that actually do that. I didn't even think it was legal. Sorry, Marisol, if
Why is Fort Collins defined as generally affluent when Loveland and Estes Park are not characterized in this way? What was the basis for that classification?
That's a good question, and I don't know that I know the answer. On the housing, part of that is the housing values in Loveland are quite a bit lower than the housing values in Fort Collins. The median incomes are lower, the housing values are lower. I don't think that, I think Estes Parks are higher. In fact, I don't know if I had that. If I had those, we have rafts of demographic numbers inside the report. I can't remember if I don't think I had those numbers on the table, but I think Estes Park actually has the highest. I just didn't say it, but Estes Park I think has the highest housing values. I can't remember about the median incomes, and the rural plains. Anyway, so but Loveland does have lower median housing values and median incomes in all those income groups than Fort Collins.
They would like you to comment on the influence of large out-of-town absentee corporations that are governed primarily just by what the market will bear. So how do we work with that as a community?
I'm not sure what the question is. How do we deal with them in what way?
The problem that I see is that we have large corporations that don't live here, feel no responsibility to the community, and run apartment buildings, and people are in those and they have no recourse because everything is what the market will bear.
Mm-hmm. I do think it's a problem. I'm hoping you have a good ombudsman program here that helps deal with complaints and monitors some. Who's here from the ombudsman program? Somebody. But they don't cover. Yeah, they don't. So you don't cover independent living or any kind of apartments. So the city has mediation. I agree that it's an issue because it's not the same as if just using a restaurant or something. I mean, you've got a captive audience that's over a certain age group. It's more difficult.
My concern is I think the city should support local people that have apartment complexes that feel a responsibility to the community, that absentee landlord really have they don't care at all what it's doing to the community, their policies.
Mm-hmm. I got to say I agree with you. That was my point about these REITs, the real estate investment trusts, buying everything. Now, because we've separated, it used to be there were chains or corporations like Sunrise or Altera or Brookdale that owned a lot of properties, but they owned and managed their own properties. And what's happened now is most of the properties have sold off the real estate, which is now owned by a real estate investment trust, and they've promised them an X return, no matter what, and that then the operator is only a lessee. They're leasing the building, and they've promised somebody to send them some money, and it's much more. And I've got friends that are working in buildings, and they've talked to me about what's different now, and there's so little flexibility and just a big drive for those returns, and I think we need to really pay attention to that. And I think it's going to drive up costs as well. And as there's, the pressure to return whatever X percent, but you really need to fix up the building, or you need to pay people more, or spend money on food. I think it's very challenging, and I don't think it's getting any better anytime soon. So if somebody from the city, I think you're supposed to start monitoring these places. I heard that.